Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Poema podcast. I am James Prescott, your host. Welcome back to the show. Really great to have you all back again. And today I have a returning guest, and I'm really excited about this conversation because it's something quite close to my heart. So we're going to talk about autism today. I'm going to talk about that in a few episodes. And people, if anyone knows, people should know. I talk about it a lot on my Twitter, but I am autistic. I'm on the spectrum, and it's something that I care a lot about and talking a lot about. So we have an expert with us today, Dr. Amy Maschall PsyD, who has written loads of books about autism and is autistic. I think you're autistic yourself. Is that right?
I'm autistic and ADHD, but I didn't know that until after I had been testing other people for several years because we're not so good at detecting neurodivergence accurately. I'm like, none of my supervisors said, "Hey, maybe there's a reason you're so drawn to this work," or "Hey, you seem
Yeah.
to have all of these traits that we're talking about right now."
Yeah. So you're highly qualified in terms of qualifications and academic qualifications, and also in lived experience.
Yep.
With all this stuff. And I can't, I said before we started recording, I've lost count of how many books you've written.
Yeah.
You've written a lot of books about this subject, and they're great. I've read some of them, they're really great. And today we're going to talk about something that I think doesn't get talked about much. And Amy wrote an article on it a few months ago, and it was really, really spoke to me. And this is, it's called justice sensitivity, right? Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And this is something that is found in autistic people in particular, you found.
Yeah, so it's not one of the like diagnostic criteria for autism, but there is like a tendency for autistic people to be more like aware and bothered by things that we perceive as unjust or unfair or like cruel in some kind of a way, or like when you know how some people will say one thing and then do the opposite. We have a much harder time with that, and if we pick up on it, we have a hard time kind of letting it go basically.
Yeah, right. And this can be. Let's just unpack this. Like, can this be? This can be like big things, like injustice in society that we all know about, that we
Yes.
see,
Hmm.
but also perceived injustice in our own
Yes.
life, or in people that we know, or people that
Hmm.
we read about,
Hmm.
or that we're connected to. Right? It can
Yeah,
be any
yeah.
kind of level of injustice.
Hmm. Yeah, a little bit of both.
Right, and this can trigger meltdowns. Then, if
Yes.
it right,
Hmm.
okay.
It can be overwhelming to kind of like that sitting with the but it's not okay. Like there's a big sensitivity to it's not okay. Like I can't just sit here and be okay with this when it's so clearly objectively not, and I can't ignore that it's not okay.
Hmm. Yeah, well, that resonates a lot with me, and explains a lot of meltdowns that I've had over the years.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, 100%. So, how did
Mhm.
you kind of like start learning and understanding that this was a thing?
Of the justice sensitivity specifically.
Yeah,
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 I mean, honestly, I would see other autistic people talking about it, and it did resonate for me. It's a tricky one because again, it's not like the DSM doesn't say like autism criteria, justice sensitivity, even though it is a noticeable pattern that it's something that a lot of us experience. And it's something that like in my own personal experience with having justice sensitivity, that it can be challenging to like figure out because I would kind of say it does, it makes me really angry. Like for me it's anger. I get like
yeah,
so mad, like this is not okay, why are you saying this is okay? And like it comes out as this rage, but I didn't initially conceptualize that as part of my neurodivergence because I'm like, you know, nobody likes unfairness.
that's right.
Nobody like,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
think, like, I mean, this is from my own understanding of an
Mhm.
experience of autism. I'm not an expert, but
Mm. You're an
like,
expert from existing.
yeah, I mean, I'm not. Yeah, what I mean is, I'm not a qualified. I'm not a
Mhm.
PhD, PSR
Mhm.
or whatever, or
Mhm.
a doctor. Like, but I have a lot of lived experience. Yes. like my brain works in kind of like rules, right? So I create rules for different things. Like I have one rule where like if I know that like when you have one of those days where everything just
Mhm.
goes wrong and you can't do anything about it, just
Yep.
everything seems to go wrong. Right. So whenever that happened, I used to have meltdowns. So I
Mhm.
created this rule called one of those days in my brain.
Aw.
So
Mhm.
when I have one of those, when I know
Mhm.
one of those days is starting to happen, I'm like, oh, it's one of those days, right? So
Mhm.
then I don't have a meltdown when those things happen because
Ah,
I've created a neuro pathway for that as a
sure.
rule,
You're
right?
like, the rule is when this is how the day is, we, like, live with.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a lot of my autism is about like rules that my brain creates. So
Mhm.
like it makes sense to me that there's like this kind of boundary in terms of our values
Mhm.
and what's right and wrong and what's good and bad and what and all that and how people should
Yeah.
behave and how they shouldn't behave
Mhm.
and what's just and unjust. That
Mhm.
would be a much stronger boundary that we
Yeah.
will not cross, right? That
Mhm.
you can't make you
Mhm.
can't make an exception for it. You can't
Right. Mhm.
like it's just there. So it makes
Yeah.
absolutely logical sense
Yeah.
that would be. And I've had experience of having meltdowns about
Sure.
just justice related stuff. Yeah,
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, and it's some of it's that I think the criteria that resonates for me is like um it essentially boils down to we can have a hard time like with like shifting and with like tolerating like here's what's supposed to happen and then with when what does happen deviates and clinically the example that's always used is like how do you handle it if your daily routine gets disrupted, how do you handle it if you were expecting to do something and it got canceled for whatever reason?
mm.
Like changes in plans, stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, I don't love that either. I mean, we, my poor husband will decide what we're going to do for dinner, and he's a lot more spontaneous than I am. So we'll decide, and then he'll be like, "Actually," and I'm like, "No, you said it was," and it's not even like I care that much. Like it's not like we're saying my favorite food to something else. I'm just like, "No, we decided this was what was going to happen, and now it's
Yeah,
not what's happening." Um,
absolutely. Yeah,
but it's kind
yeah,
of, justice sensitivity. Here is what is supposed to, here is the right thing to do. Why is
yeah.
that not what's being done?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I
Mhm.
feel that. I feel that
Mhm.
very very
Mhm.
strongly. Uh, and of course, in what happened last November, I think a lot
Mhm.
of people felt that really strongly. Like,
Here is what's
oh,
supposed to happen. Like, what's
yeah, like
going on?
yeah. I mean, it threw me out. The whole
Mhm.
thing threw me out because
Mhm.
I hadn't I hadn't prepared mentally for the possibility of what happening.
Yep.
I just
Mhm.
thought that's
Mhm.
not going to happen. I just couldn't
Yeah.
see it happening,
Mhm.
and so I hadn't prepared. Like, hadn't created
Mm.
a neuro
You didn't
pathway
have a
for how
script
to deal
for
with
it. Yeah.
so it took me a month
Mhm.
really to get my head right again.
Ah.
Like I was
Mhm.
totally out of sync for like a month
Yeah.
because my head was having to adjust to this new
Right.
reality that I hadn't prepared for.
Mhm.
And also, of course, the injustice of it and like the harm that's going to come to loads of people and all of that kind of thing. Like
Mhm.
it was a lot. Yeah, I mean, it is a lot still, really. But
Yeah.
I've now kind of trained myself to learn how to deal with it.
Mhm.
But yeah, yeah. So I mean, so what like to people who like are new to this, like what happens in the brain when this kind of thing happens, when this
Sure.
trigger happens? What actually goes on?
Yeah. So, I mean, the neurobiology piece is a little bit outside of my expertise, but essentially, it's that the shifting is harder. So, actually, there's been some recent studies that, so when you're born, you have way more brain cells than you're ever going to need. There's like more neurons than we know what to do with. And
Yeah.
as you develop, your brain prunes. So you lose brain cells throughout childhood because you don't need that many. And then your brain, part of it, obviously nature versus nurture, but the parts of it are like learning from the environment. Okay, what pathways do we need? What pathways are useful and helpful to us? And like, how do we make this more efficient? And what some research has found is that Autistic brains don't necessarily prune as much as neurotypical brains. So we are like a lot of the sensitivities that we experience, like for me, certain sounds are like I like they're physically painful to hear certain things, even though like what do you mean that's physically painful? It's a sound. Why how does how does that hurt? Like it's literally painful in a physical way for me to hear certain sounds. And part of that is because there's more brain cells to pull in the information from the external world. So in
Ah,
some cases we will, and granted, like everyone is still unique. I'm not saying every autistic person has this exact experience, but like because it's pulling in so much more, you feel things a lot harder when
yeah.
you've got more brain cells pulling them in. And like I don't mean that as a dig on the intelligence of people who aren't autistic, but like if you're like, why does the light seem brighter to me? Like
Mm,
it could be that your brain is literally perceiving more light because there's more
mm,
there's more neurons connected to your eyes, making you look at stuff more intensely.
interesting. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
then, like for me, I prefer low light. Really, I
Mhm. Mhm.
absolutely prefer
Yeah.
low light.
Mhm.
Light in a room, like just to
Mhm.
having a big light on is like I have to,
Yeah.
I have to do that for
Mhm.
Zoom calls and things because I have to
Yeah.
because otherwise they can't see me. But
Right.
it always has to be behind me. I can't look at it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And loud sounds as well. Like motorbikes are a thing for me. I
Mhm.
can't I cannot stand motorbikes just appearing from nowhere and going right
Oh,
past me.
yes.
Really, and
Mhm.
I always do that. Like
Ah,
always, I
yeah.
just like
Mhm.
or just turn away. It's every time because I can't
Mhm.
deal with it. Like I don't
Yeah.
like it, and I
Mhm.
don't know if it physically hurts, but
Mm.
I don't like it. It like freaks
It's
me out.
more into
Yeah,
like you notice that your react and one of my I mean again because I was I was convincing myself that I was neurotypical for many years, but I would always be like, oh yeah, but nobody likes a loud motorcycle. And it's like, okay, there's nobody likes a loud motorcycle, and there's people who can be like, oh, that's kind of annoying, and then move on with their day.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I've never. Yeah, loud
Mhm.
noises, like really loud, sudden
Mhm.
loud noises. I don't like.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah. Like,
I
no.
think that's why I was scared of dogs to start with because,
Sure, they're loud.
yeah, like I love dogs now. I'm a dog
Mhm.
person, but I
Yeah,
still, as long as I know the dog, it's okay. Like, but
sure.
still, big dogs, loud dogs,
Mhm. You gotta know
still,
what they're like, you gotta know their personality, because
that's
then a
it.
little bit more,
Yeah,
what like, you don't necessarily know every time he's gonna bark, but you know what the bark sounds like, and you can
yeah,
kind of
exactly.
make
Like
it work.
with our dog, when I was
Mhm,
over with my
mhm,
with my wife in our house
mhm,
last summer,
mhm.
she doesn't bark hardly ever.
Aw, mhm.
Right, and she got a bit freaked out because my wife had to go out 3 times in a day.
Oh, yeah.
So she did bark, but I wasn't
Yeah.
scared because it was a
Yeah.
dog that I know, and I knew why she was barking. So I was able to
Mhm.
just calm her down, and she was
Yeah.
okay. Like, so if it's a dog I know, it's fine now. And I guess that's another neuro pathway that's been
Yep.
created, right?
Yeah. You train your
And
brain to like what to get used to and how to cope with different things.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, and it really is an example of how your brain works and how you can train your brain to
Yeah.
do different
Mhm.
things, like and
Mhm.
create neural pathways.
Mhm.
I find this all fascinating, even though I'm not an
Yeah.
expert in it. I think
Mhm.
it's just fascinating
Mhm.
how the brain is so malleable. Like,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I
and
mean,
even
another thing as far like, sorry, I know I go way off topic all the time, but
no,
like as
go
far
for
as
it.
the justice sensitivity, there's also the piece of like the special interest, or the DSM calls it the intense fixated interests. It's like when we are like for an autistic person, oftentimes we don't like things a medium amount. It is all or no. I've started comparing it to most people's brains have dimmer switches, and they can turn that dimmer switch up to 20% and be like, oh, this is kind of interesting. I don't have a dimmer switch, I have a light switch. I
Yeah,
either do not care, or it's 100% and it's my whole existence, which
Yep, that's
means
it.
that when someone who's not autistic says, oh yeah, that kind of sucks, and like I can't, there's nothing I can do in this moment to fix it, so I need to cope and move on. When you've got a light switch, you're like,
Yeah. I mean,
I
I
need,
have a whole like. I actually noticed this. I have a lot of special interests, almost on rotation in
yes.
my
Mhm,
brain, right at
mhm.
different points. And
Yeah,
sometimes I'll be like two or three on the go at once.
yeah.
Sometimes I'll be a lot all on the go at once. Like, but
Mhm,
uh, yeah. But when I'm into them, I'm like, I'm in everything. Like that's it.
right.
I'm reading everything. I'm watching
Mhm,
load any documentary I can find on it. I'm reading stuff on
mhm,
the internet. I'm just like I'm completely obsessing over it. Like and it can be completely random things sometimes appear out of nowhere. Like
mhm,
it related to something that that's already a special interest.
mhm.
So here's an example. Like Jimmy Carter passed away recently.
Yes.
Really sad.
Mhm.
Really really sad. And but I've always been interested in politics, so I've got a
Mm.
politics degree. It's one of
Yeah,
my special interests, right? And
yeah.
American politics is one of my special interests. American president. So like
Sure.
when he passed away, I was like, I watching like every documentary I could find,
Mhm, mhm,
like reading anything I could have been finding quotes,
mhm.
everything.
Yeah.
And that's been really great. It's nice. Like I enjoy it. It's not like
Mhm.
a But then another time I won't have any interest in politics whatsoever. I'll be focused on Superman, like because the
Sure.
movie's coming out, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Mhm,
well, that's probably a special interest that happens all the time,
mhm.
to be honest. But
Yeah.
um,
That's maybe your,
you know what I
do
mean,
you,
right?
do you have ADHD as well, or?
Yes, I do.
Okay. I was gonna say dopamine seeking with ADHD sometimes means that the interest is 1,000%, but then the light switch flicks off because, been there, done that, like,
Yeah,
next.
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and also there's times where I have nothing stimulating me,
Oh.
and that
Mhm.
often happens after I've had a bit of a meltdown or been overwhelmed,
Mhm.
and then
Mhm.
I'm just
Mhm.
sitting in bed. I'm like,
Mhm.
I'm going through all these interests in my
Yeah.
head, and there's like nothing
Mhm.
is stimulating me. Nothing.
Mhm.
I don't like, and I'm like, what do I do now? like,
Right.
like I have to try and force something because I just don't have anything that's stimulating me. So
Mhm.
it's a really, really, yes, quite surreal. That you have to find ways
Yeah.
out of that because it can become depressing. Like if you're
Yeah.
not anything stimulating you, it's
Mhm.
yeah, it's like everything's turned off.
Yeah.
Everything's at 0%, and you're like, no, it's not like you've got some medium interest that
Right.
you go
Mhm.
into because we don't do that, right?
Right. I
Yeah,
tend not to like things in medium, and it's one of those things that you need both in like humanity, because I will go until I drop, and that's not healthy.
nope,
But also when it's important, I will get it done. So like any quality can cause problems to an extreme.
yeah. Like so, if I have a problem, I need to solve it. I
Yeah.
will be hyper focused on that problem until it is solved.
Yeah. Mhm.
And I won't be able to sleep until it's solved. Like
Mhm.
even if I lose something that's really important, I won't be able to sleep
Mhm.
until I find it.
Yeah.
I'll be like completely hyper fixated on it. Like, where is it? I need to look.
Where is it? What's it? Yeah, I
Like,
need
no,
to
it's
do
in the
this
morning, but
right
I need to look
now.
for it now. Like,
Yeah. Mhm. Mhm.
yeah, and even though I don't need it until I don't know 2 days time or
Right.
something.
Nope, nope, I
Like,
gotta do it right now. I gotta figure it out right now.
yeah, like I'm going out tomorrow. And I've got to wear a suit. I found out about that on Tuesday, and it was like
Mm,
Tuesday night, really late. I found out, and I was like, no, I've got to do this now.
right.
I've got to
Yep.
make sure
It's
I've got all of this
happening
now.
now.
Yeah, it was like yeah, like 11 o'clock at night. I've got to find all my stuff and get ready now because otherwise I won't be ready.
Right. It's
And I
time.
think, yeah,
Gotta do it right now.
yeah, and it is already. It is already. It's ready behind
Mhm.
me. So yeah, but yeah, I mean, like the whole. So the justice sensitivity thing be almost become a hyper focus in itself?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, your special interest can be the justice issue itself, and so it's like it's kind of I mean, the way that I see it is it's kind of a combination of these. Like, if you look at the DSM, you can kind of see in these different traits how they can be framed around, and like how when you read these traits, knowing what justice sensitivity is, you can see and you can be like, oh yeah, that, like I see how, I can see how these traits equal this response. So, it can be your special interest. It can be, this is the way it's supposed to be, and I'm having trouble letting go of things not aligning with that. It can be that sensitivity of this thing is wrong. Like, how do I fix the wrong thing? So kind of a little bit of all of them, I would say.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and having a special interest of politics.
Yeah.
That's probably
It sounds like it would get exhausting
it,
because,
it does.
oh
It
my
does. It does.
God.
But it does, and I do have little meltdowns at certain people who I don't feel much compassion towards.
Mhm.
And that's hard for me because I try to be somebody who humanizes everyone and doesn't want to
Yeah.
dehumanize others,
Right?
even if I don't like them or even if they're a bad person. So I'm
Yeah.
kind of conflicted sometimes because my autism is like they are an evil person, they are a bad person
Mhm.
who deserves bad things
Mhm.
and deserves to be punished for what they've done.
Mhm.
Like and feel the sense of justice of like them
Mhm.
getting punished in some way,
Yeah.
like a horrible way, which is probably not a healthy way to be punished.
Sure.
But then there's like my core self is like, no, 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 come on, we've got to,
Mhm.
So I'm kind of there's always that little battle
Mhm.
battle going on.
Sure. And I mean, this not necessarily directly related to autistic traits, but a lot of autistic people have the experience of being treated poorly. So,
Yeah,
like, I know how it feels to be bullied and to be othered and to be called weird, and all of this. So, there's maybe a desire to extend compassion because I know what it's like to be denied that, and it really sucks. So, I don't, I don't want bad things because I know, I know how it feels to be treated that way, and I don't want others to experience what I experienced. And yeah.
absolutely. Like
Mhm.
so, like, have you figured out like any ways that autistic people can navigate this? Like, especially being autistic yourself
Mhm.
as
Mhm.
well. Like,
Mhm.
any kind of practical things that
Sure.
autistic people can do to help navigate this?
Yeah, I do try to balance because, actually, we were talking on Blue Sky the other day about like, is there a term other than like special interest that people, because someone had kind of equated it, and I'm not saying don't use that term. I'm not saying you have to use that term. Just stating this is what the discussion was about. But that someone had said that it kind of felt like that the term special interest was hitting them with some condescension. Like it felt condescending to be like, this is your special and
I
that's not
see.
how
Yeah.
I feel using that term. But we were discussing like, is there a better word? And someone had said, what about passion? And I said that hits me kind of weird, just simply and again, if that resonates for somebody, I'm not saying don't, like, do what makes you happy. But for me, I'm like, okay, my special interest of psychology of my job, yeah, absolutely, that's a passion. Another one of my special interests is the US version of the television show The Office. I don't know that I would say I'm passionate about The Office,
Yeah.
but I don't
Yeah. Exactly. I think I think like
know.
with those terms, it's like
Mhm.
you can use what works for you.
Sure.
I like using special interest because it's kind of broad and it works for me. It
Yeah,
doesn't feel
yeah.
patronising for me. I mean, if it does feel patronising for somebody or
Yeah.
condescending, they shouldn't
Mhm.
use it.
Right,
Use something that feels comfortable. Like,
right.
but when
Mhm.
somebody said special interest to me, I don't feel condescended or patronised.
Yeah. You
Like
get
because
to, yeah, you get to have the experience that you have, and you get to name it what works for you, and it's helpful to have terms that we agree on just simply because if we all agree that that's what this word means, then I know what you're talking about when you say it.
yeah, yeah,
But, if someone doesn't agree with me that, I'm more like the surveys, the autistic not weird survey that I mentioned earlier, looked at a preference for identity first versus person first language, autistic person versus person with autism. And it was something like 80% preferred identity first. So I say autistic people and I write autistic people when I'm writing because 80% of autistic people asked said, this is how I want you to talk about me. Now, if
Okay.
I'm one-on-one with someone and they say, no, I want you to call me a person with autism, I'm not going to be like, you're wrong about your identity. I'm going to say, okay, when I'm talking to you or when I'm referring to you, I will use the language you choose for you.
Absolutely, that's exactly how it should be. Yeah, autistic person
Mm-hmm.
works for me. I think that
Mm-hmm.
makes more sense.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also less words to use as well.
Yeah, it's faster, it's more
uh,
efficient, and I get the whole like, with
identity
the
first.
is a type
Yeah,
of neurodivergence that is very like, how do you separate? Like, if you made me not autistic, I'm not sure that I would still be like, a lot
yeah.
of what I do really stems from those autistic traits specifically. So, but someone
Exactly.
else doesn't feel that way. You're not wrong, but I'm
Yeah,
not wrong either.
that's right. Exactly. It's like, yeah. I mean, like for me, I guess I feel like if I'm called a person with autism, it means like I've got something wrong with me.
Mm,
You know,
mhm,
uh, like, uh, like I'm a person, but I have this thing that is makes me different or
mhm,
wrong or whatever.
mhm.
Now, other people may not feel that at all,
Sure.
but that's how I feel.
Yeah.
Like, so
Mhm,
autistic person makes much more
mhm.
sense to me.
Yeah.
But again, we're all different. So
Oh,
yeah,
yeah, and I'm
absolutely.
pretty like I'll say what my opinion is, and I'll say what the research I've consumed says, but I've always got a million caveats. I mean, even in my books where I talk about autism, I have a disclaimer at the beginning that I'm like, I'm going to do my best to be accurate, to be affirming, to be, to be non-stigmatizing, non-harmful, and if you're talking to an autistic person who says, I disagree with her, I think she's wrong about this, don't use my work to speak over them. They're allowed to disagree with me.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a really good approach.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Look, I think in terms of the justice sensitivity, like, well, maybe like a word for like for parents of autistic children
Mm-hmm.
or partners of autistic
Mm-hmm.
people who maybe aren't autistic. Uh, like, what kind of advice, guidance, like insight would you
Mm-hmm.
give to them
I have been
about
begging. I've
autistic?
been begging my husband to write some kind of book because, I mean, now I can't evaluate him because I'm married to him. But part of my job when I do assessments, I have an obligation to learn how to use them before I give them to a client. So he has been my guinea pig for over a decade of like when I get a new measure, he takes it so that I can practice administering and I can practice reading the results. Um, all that to say, I can't say definitively any diagnosis he does or does not have, but I'm pretty confident that he's not autistic because he's completed a bunch of these, and they've all really said no. So like I feel like he would be like I would like to pick his brain of like not in like a not in like a hating way, but I kind of want to be like, how do you live with me? How
Yeah,
does that work for you? Like, but
yeah,
the understanding. He has gotten really good at like so because I also get some of the PDA kind of so it'll be like if you tell me, hey, this would be a good idea, I might be like, well, now I'm not gonna because you told me to. But he's gotten good at like kind of what do you need in this moment, or like pointing out that um yes, the thing that you are upset about is a thing to be upset about, and also like how's your energy doing right now, like how are you using your energy in this moment. uh
yeah.
yeah, like am I, because it's true, you go like you spin your wheels like that and that'll wear you down, and a lot of the perpetrators of injustice want us worn down. Um, so it's yeah.
Mm, yeah, that's right. I think like
Hmm.
talking about it, listening is a
Hmm.
good thing. Trying to understand the perspective of the autistic
Yeah.
person.
Hmm. Yeah.
Like, why do you feel this way? What's going on for you? Like, what is it you're really angry about? Like,
Yeah.
just
Or like,
listening.
what do you need in this moment?
Yeah,
Because
what do you need? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
a lot of things I'm just as sensitive about are not things that I by myself in an afternoon am going to be able to make right as much as I might want to.
mm,
So it can be helpful because that's I mean that's every justice issue really, especially, oh my gosh, lately in this moment in history that we keep living through all these fun unprecedented times, like, the powers that be, the status quo wants us too tired to do anything about it. So
yeah,
how am I conserving my energy? Because yeah, not that these things don't matter, but is sitting in my house stewing on it helping? Or is there something else that I could be doing with my energy, or even not doing something with my energy in this, specific moment? Is there something else that I could be focusing on right this second that might be, a healthier direction to go in, like, for today? And because again, like with the special interest and the hyper focus, like, a lot of us, we will go until the gas tank is empty and then go a little bit more. And that's one of the reasons why autistic burnout happens.
yeah,
Because when you wear yourself down to empty and then keep going, you burn out. So it's kind of that, for myself, I try to frame it as, can I shift my focus to something else, at least for this moment, to make sure that I have the energy to go after these things that matter, or like to figure out what is what's something actionable, actionable steps, like what can I actually do right now.
yeah, absolutely. And like, yeah, I mean, adults who are autistic can, when you're aware. For me, I know that as soon as I was aware this was a thing,
Hmm.
it really helped me.
Yeah.
Like, be aware
Mhm.
of
Right.
what was going on when I had these
Hmm.
reactions.
Hmm.
And when you become aware of what's going on, you can start to regulate
Oh
yourself.
yeah.
You can
Hmm.
start to figure out strategies for how to spot this stuff in yourself
Oh
and
yeah.
in your body, and how to
Hmm.
respond to it, and how maybe how to nip it
Yeah.
in the bud as well. Like, so that's definitely something that I've been doing.
Hmm.
And and I'm quite in tune with my body anyway.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of embodiment work and working with embodiment coaches and things.
Sure, sure.
And I do internal family systems therapy as well.
Mm.
So I have a lot of connection with my body. So it yeah, it really it's really helpful, like,
Mhm.
knowing that that's a thing, because
Yeah.
I can now, like, say,
Mhm.
oh,
Mhm.
that's why I'm at. That's why I'm feeling this anger. That's why I'm
Sure.
feeling like this. Like,
Here's
something
what's
I feel
happening.
something's
And
been wronged.
I mean, that's part
Like,
of why
yeah,
getting a diagnosis was so huge for me, because I
yeah,
just thought, like, oh, I'm just really bad at some things. Like, no, no, your brain is different and it has different needs, and that doesn't mean you're bad. It just means you need help with different things.
yeah. That's right. It just means your brain works differently. That's the way I communicate what autism is to people. To anyone, even children will understand that. It's
Mhm.
just your brain works differently to other people, and it means you have to learn how to live with your brain different to other people. It doesn't mean you're worse than other people. In fact,
Right.
it sometimes it means you're good at things that other people aren't good at.
And it's
So
okay if you're not good at something, and it's okay. I mean, when I
yeah,
did IEP tests, every single child that I evaluated, I would always ask them if what their understanding it was of why of what we were doing. And like a lot of them either didn't know, or they'd really mean things to say about themselves, of like, you're here because I'm bad at whatever. And I would just say, well, everybody's got things that they need help with. and I'm here to see what things you need help with and how your teachers and your parents can help you with those things so that you can just so that some of those things can be a little easier for you. And you
Yeah,
know,
and that's it. Yeah, there's nothing deficient about being autistic at
right.
all.
Mhm.
It just means that you have different needs than other people. That's all.
Right. And I mean, I will like it is for me, I am disabled in a lot of ways. Not in a way that really gets me a lot of help outside of my own social circle,
Yeah.
but like, you know, that's it's not that's there's nothing shameful or wrong about being disabled. And
No.
that's something that I run into with the like, no, it's a superpower. The people who are like, it's not a disability because, and if you push them on it, I found someone who will say autism's not a disability. If you push them on why are you very opposed to calling this a disability? A lot of times it comes down to some internalized ableism of like, well,
Yeah.
because it's not bad. Okay, well, being disabled's not like that
Not bad.
doesn't make you
Yeah.
lesser than either. So like I'm
Yeah.
not
I mean,
better than somebody who has a disability that requires something that I don't need. And yeah.
yeah. I mean, I have other disabilities or conditions
Mhm,
outside of
mhm.
ADHD and autism. You know, I'm epileptic, and
Mm,
you
mhm.
know, and I'm on medication for depression. Although I
Yeah.
don't think I have clinical depression, but it was
Mm.
depression is linked to epilepsy because that's
Yeah.
it's
Oh,
linked to the brain.
sure. Mhm,
Like so, people
mhm,
with epilepsy can get depressed
mm.
because of how it affects the brain.
Sure, that's with
Loads of,
ADHD as well. I mean,
yeah,
there's a certain amount of like existing in a world that really doesn't seem to like you or want to help you is in itself depressing. But ADHD specifically, they found some genetic overlap that the genes that predispose you to ADHD also make you more likely to experience depression. So,
yeah, and that makes sense. That's
mhm,
absolutely logical.
mhm,
So yeah, I have all that going on as well as being autistic, and but I don't consider myself deficient or any less than anybody else.
mhm,
I'm just different,
mhm.
unique. And yeah, you're right about that kind of. There's a bit of toxic positivity
Yeah.
around that kind of. Oh, it's all a superpower. Like it's all positive. Like
It's not
no,
like
like
yeah.
I get the kind of how the like. So there's some good
Mhm.
things about being
Sure.
autistic.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Mhm.
and you can call them superpowers if you want, but
Sure.
like you have to still acknowledge that it's a
Mhm.
disability and that
Right,
it means you have different needs to other people.
right.
Like
I wouldn't
like
have as many books written as I have if I didn't have a special interest in the stuff I write books about, like, that's just a fact, and also, I've had times where I go to the grocery store and there's too many people there and I leave without buying anything because I can't handle being out in public right now, like,
yeah,
that like,
yeah. No,
I can't
I
do a task of daily living. Like that's the definition of
yeah. I remember
it's
going out on New Year's Day. I went out for a drink, and there was no one outside
mm,
because New Year's Day everyone's
mhm.
sleeping.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, this is great. There's no one around except me. Like it was like
Everyone else
heaven. You
inside
know,
more often.
it was so great. Like just no one being outside except me. Like it was like Christmas. It's like
Yeah.
because
Mhm.
when you have ADHD or
Yeah.
autism, uh, for people who don't have it or don't haven't
Mhm.
experienced it, like lots of people being around can be overstimulating
Yeah.
and can feel overwhelming, and like it's too much. Your brain, it's too much information at once for your brain to process.
Mhm. Mhm.
Right, that's the
Yeah.
simple way of explaining it. Like we kind of talked about this earlier, didn't we?
Yeah.
Like all the kind of
You've
like
got more
you've got more
your
brain,
brain
more
is
receptors.
taking in more, and
Yeah,
that makes it louder.
yeah, exactly. Right. So when there's more people, it's it's louder, right? And
Mhm.
when there's less people, it's
Mhm.
quiet. You know?
Yeah. It's like the
uh,
volume's turned up and, like, the knob
yeah,
is broken off, so you cannot turn it back down. That's you're not allowed to.
yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I have an exception. Like when I'm with my wife, I feel very we're very regulated, and then I regulate her. Like, it's not a codependent thing. It's just
Mhm.
the effect we have on each other because we feel safe around each
Aw.
other. So, like, it's almost like he doesn't count as a person sometimes.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
he's just a safe person to be with. But both of us are introverts, and both of us need our introvert time.
Mhm.
So we
Mhm.
have that separate,
Mhm.
like where we're like not in the same room, we're just doing our own
Mhm.
thing, and it's totally fine.
Yeah.
Uh, and we still love each other, and we still spend time together, and we're still like uh, still happily married. But it's just that we have respect each other's boundaries, and and part of my introvert time is probably ADHD and autism related as well.
Sure.
So yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a really good conversation.
Mhm.
I think it's good to talk about things like this because I don't think it gets talked about enough, and people need to know more about it. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, people know about autism more now, but even then, there's still a lot of education that people need to hear about it,
Mhm.
and things like this, though the sensitivity, um, it's justice sensitivity. It's
Mhm.
if people don't know, I didn't know about it, and I've done a load of stuff reading on autism, and I
Mhm.
try and learn as much as I can about autism. And I didn't know about it.
Sure, yeah. Well, because
So,
it's not one of the criteria, and it's one of those things that, when we talk about there can be that, some people don't identify with strengths, and that's, I'm not trying to push that on anybody. And also some autistic people don't identify as disabled, and that's okay too, as long as I will take an issue if you say, no, I'm not disabled because I have, because of that because of an ableist belief. I'll take issue with that. But if you're like, I don't feel like I'm disabled, that's that's whatever. But like, it's not something that gets talked about because so much of the conversation tends to be around like, what's wrong with you, like how do we fix you. And it's we did talk a bit about how it can burn you out to really focus on like the justice sensitivity, but like in general it's really really seen as like it's kind of hard to frame that as like pathological. Like, you want good
mm,
things to happen in the world. Like, it's
yeah,
hard to talk about that in a way that makes us sound like we're the problem. So I think it gets brushed under the rug in some of the mainstream
yeah,
conversations.
absolutely. Because I think lots of people care about
Mhm.
justice, right? And get angry about injustice and things in the world. And like, I think it's just that, and I think we tried to explain this earlier. Like the way that the autistic brain works, is that there's kind of like very hard boundaries and rules about how things are meant to be, and our brains can't process. Well, they find it hard to process why that wouldn't happen.
Mm.
Like, you know, this isn't right. This isn't
Mhm.
fair. This isn't just. Like, why would they do this? Why would this happen? I don't
Like, why
understand.
would
Like,
you want to do an unjust thing? And
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Like
Mhm.
it's kind of, it's almost. I don't want to say childish. It's not childish.
It
It's
gets
kind
framed
of,
that way
it
sometimes, though.
does. Yeah, it
Sometimes
does.
the answer
It's
I get is
more
like,
idealistic.
"Oh,
It sounds
yeah,
like idealistic,
yeah,
like almost naive
yeah.
in a sense. Like,
Like, life's not
uh,
fair, sweetie, get used to it." And I'm like, "You
but I
just
don't.
want
I
to
get used
accept
to it.
that premise?"
Yeah, and this happens a lot for me.
Mhm.
I get like angry
Yeah.
about. It's like, but it shouldn't be this way. Like,
Right.
why? And they say, yeah, but it is. Yeah, but it shouldn't be. Like,
Yeah.
somebody should do something about it. Like,
Right. Because it is not a reason in my mind to be like, "Oh, okay."
yeah, exactly. That's not a reason. Like,
I'm like, "Oh, all the more reason for us to problem solve alternatives." But no, people don't like when I do that. Well, some people
yeah,
like when I do that.
yeah, I know. I resonate. I
Mhm.
resonate completely with that. So yeah, so I'm glad we were able to talk about it and
Mhm.
explain it a bit more
Yeah.
to people. And I'm sure we'll have you back on the show because there's so much we can
Yay.
talk about
Yeah.
with autism and
Mhm.
more topics and things
Yeah.
around it. And you've got a load of books out
Yes, and I've
and a
got
new one coming
one.
out soon.
Yeah, the one that's dropping in April. Let me get the title right. Hang on.
Because you've written a lot
So
of books.
yes. So and so okay, neurodiversity affirming therapy, what every mental health provider needs to know, and that is with W. Norton. We're very excited.
Awesome. And what's the one you wrote for parents of
Yep.
autistic
So
children?
back in 2020, I self published I Don't Want to Be Bad, which has some techniques for helping kids make good choices when they're having some behavioral concerns. It does pull from some cognitive behavioral kind of strategies, but it's focused really on, like, instead of just, you're bad, I'm going to punish you till you're better. Like,
Yeah,
hey, how do we get the underlying need met? And if the you know if you're overwhelmed, how can we communicate this in a healthier way? And how can
yeah,
for parents, how can you regulate yourself? Because kids are sponges and kids are mirrors. They will soak up whatever you're doing and they will reflect it right back to you. And I can't tell you how many times parents are like, oh, that this is this the child is really the barometer of, like, hey, there's some stuff going on here that we maybe should address, that the kid does not have the power to address.
absolutely, absolutely. And where can people find all of this stuff and all
Yes,
your other
I
work?
mean, the easiest spot, my so I have a couple of websites, but my blog, resiliencymentalhealth.com, there's a tab that says books. So I've got the books I've written about mental health. I've got a couple children's books. I've got yeah, so it's kind of all on there. And then I've also got a whole bunch of blog posts. I think I hit 500 last year, of just different
Wow.
topics. Thank you. Related to mental health. And then, I mean, once in a while, because it's my website and no one can stop me, I'll also be like, here's some pictures from my vacation. Everybody look.
Awesome. Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, I've read your articles on
Oh, thank you.
other websites as well.
Oh,
Like,
yes. Yep. I write with Very Well Mind and Everyday Health are the main
yeah,
ones right now.
I think it was Everyday Health that had the article on. It was one of those two anyway that had the
I
article
think
on
it was
justice
Very
sensitivity.
Well that had justice sensitive.
Was it? Okay. Yeah, I
Because
knew it was one of those two. Yeah.
with Everyday Health, I've been doing reviewing therapy resource. Like, I try them out, and then I write about what I like about them, what I don't like about them. Yeah.
Interesting. Great. Well, do check all of those out. I highly recommend them.
Yay.
And Amy will probably be back on the show, I'm sure. I love having her on the show and
Yay.
talking about autism. It's nice to talk about autism with somebody
Hmm.
who's also autistic and
Hmm. Hmm.
understands you. I think
Yay.
that's a fair thing. It's a fair thing to say because you can share experiences. But thanks, Amy, for coming on,
Thank
uh,
you.
and thanks for listening, everybody.